Today's episode is sponsored by Datadog, a modern full-stack monitoring platform for cloud infrastructure, applications, and logs metrics, all in one place. From their recent report on serverless adoption and trends, Datadog found half their customer base using EC2s have now adopted AWS Lambda. They've examined real-world serverless usage by thousands of companies running on millions of distinct serverless functions, and they found that half of the Lambda invocations run for less than 800 milliseconds. You can easily monitor all your serverless functions in one place and generate serverless metrics straight from Datadog. Check it out yourself by signing up for a free 14-day trial and get a free t-shirt. Visit datadog.com/HanselMinutesShow to get started. That's datadog.com/HanselMinutesShow to get started. Hi, this is Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hansel Minutes. Today I'm talking with Aisha Addo. She is an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, and a speaker. She has a company called DriveHER and a foundation called the Power to Girls Foundation, and she is joining me from Canada. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you so much, Scott, for this opportunity.
No, I'm happy to chat with you. You're all over the internet, and I'm finding all kinds of cool videos of you talking to people in the news, and I wish I had a media section on my website about all the cool stuff that I was doing.
Thank you.
So you're in Canada right now. You're calling from Canada, but you also have a relationship with Ghana.
Yes, absolutely. That's my home country.
Mm-hmm. And you have an NGO, or a non-governmental organization. We call them nonprofits here in the U.S. Called Power to Girls. Is it specific to Ghana, or is it bi-coastal kind of Ghana and Canada?
It's actually Ghana and Canada. Essentially what we do is that we provide programming for marginalized girls, and our focus is around empowerment, leadership, mentorship, and really just building up their self-esteem for them to be able to create change within their various societies. So we do that both in Canada and in Ghana.
What does that mean to you, that empowerment? I really like saying that a lot. I use that word a lot to talk about feeling empowered. I want everyone of all kinds to feel empowered. Why are they not empowered? Why are they disempowered?
So I think a lot of times when we do think about empowerment, a lot of folks think it is a matter of giving something to someone that they do not already have. For us, and for me personally, empowerment means that it's just helping them amplify and cultivating something that they already have. So a lot of times, like society, when you take young girls, for example, there's a lot of things around them that causes them to feel less than they are, or to think of themselves as less than they are. And our program is set up to really remind them of who they are, and also just really cultivating that power that they have, not from not from a negative standpoint, but really more around how can I really amplify my voice? How can I create change within my society? But then how can I also make sure that the people around me feel and understand myself, and then I also understand everything else that is going on around me? So that's what that's what we mean by empowerment, or to me personally.
Right, because this isn't about a handout, or here's some money, or here's some this, or here's some that. It's about taking a person who feels like they have no voice, no ability, no access, and saying you can do this, and here's the mentorship, the community, and the activities that will help you build that internal voice that tells you that I can.
Absolutely.
Interesting. So is this is one-on-one coaching? How is this different from a school? Is it like a community center?
So it is not a community center. So in Canada, for example, one of the things that we've been able to do is actually build a partnership with the school. So it works as a after-school program where we actually run the programs within the schools, with the schools, in partnership with the schools. So we have facilitators that we have trained personally, and then we disperse them across the different schools that we're in, and then they deliver the programs. And then we also have community members and community mentors that we, work with, that would come into the schools and share their personal stories. One of the things that we've recognized, especially for folks that are marginalized, is that representation is so important. Representation matters so much. So we bring folks that, have conquered their individual challenges, and have broken some of the glass ceilings that were put in their place, to come out and share and share with these girls. So, sometimes we'll have lawyers, we'll have doctors, we'll have technology folks come through, talk to the girls, and empower them and remind them and let them know that they too are capable of actually reaching those different heights that they want to reach.
Mm-hmm. Of course, I'm not an underrepresented group. I'm an overrepresented group, but I'm type 1 diabetic, and I noticed recently that diabetics are now allowed in America to fly an airplane.
Oh.
And this might seem like a small thing, and it's certainly, I don't mean to draw a direct comparison between an underrepresented, uneducated adolescent girl, but when someone says, "Oh, that's a thing that I was not able to do, and now that is now allowed." I don't want to be a pilot, but I'm like, oh, wow. Like, I could totally do that. Like, I thought about being a pilot. I tried to, like, for example, I tried to be in the Army. I can't be in the Army because of diabetes. These are small things. But if you go and think about, like you said on your website, no one is more vulnerable than an uneducated adolescent girl. Think about the doors that are closed. Like, my biggest complaint is, well, gosh, I can't be a pilot. Think of the doors that are closed to them. And then we have to ask ourselves, how do we systematically open those doors one at a time or all at once?
Absolutely. And I think, you actually gave a really good example in terms of like access, right? So it's like one thing when you know that you have access to something, and then it's another thing when it's actually closed to you. So I think for us, what we're really doing is letting the girls know that access is there, and they have us and all these amazing women as resources to be able to actually get to that next step that they want to get to. So then that way it becomes, instead of it becoming them being shut out of it, it becomes a choice, like you said. So in your case, now you know that this is an option for you. You might not necessarily want to be a pilot, but you know that, hey, in case I want to be a pilot, I'm actually able to do that and I have access to that. So that's really amazing.
Yeah. And so what do the young women that you work with see themselves doing if they've never seen a lawyer, a doctor, a programmer, a president that is from their place? What do they think, that they're going to become a homemaker, which is fine?
That's actually, yeah. And I love the fact that you actually asked that question, because that is one of the key things that we get. So I'll give you an example. We did a session in Ghana, and I'm going to use Ghana as the perfect example for this. So we did a session in Ghana, and we asked the girls what are some of the things that they want to pursue as career alternative or an objective. And some of the answers that we were hearing was ridiculous. Like, there were some that felt like, their only option was to become a trader. And when we say trader, like, like a market woman, essentially like, just selling stuff.
Right.
Some of
You have
them
a
just
small food cart or something.
Exactly. Some of them thought that, they're supposed to be, stay at home. They're supposed to be like a wife, mother and all that, which is fine to the people that want that. But then one of the key things that we asked them, and to the people that said, okay, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be, an engineer, there was always a but. So we questioned and asked, why was the but? And then they said, because women are not supposed to be in these sectors. Women are not supposed to be doing these things. So for us, we took that as an opportunity to actually bring into the schools women that were in those particular sectors. So we brought a soldier, we brought a doctor, we brought a community worker, we brought a lawyer, we brought a banker, for them to see and recognize that they're actually able to do this thing. So I think it's really important to know that in today's day and age, because of social media, and also because of technology, actually, there's been a lot of like new career options that are out there. But then a lot of people still don't see themselves represented or see themselves as actually going into those sectors, because they don't see people that look like them, or they feel like it's only limited to like, a particular group of people. So I love the fact that you asked that question. And honestly, it's been amazing watching the girls evolve and watching them actually challenging themselves to go into non-traditional roles.
Yeah, it is important to note that, if you are a homemaker, if raising a family, if being the head of a household is what you want to do, that's important. If it is the only option available to you, that's where I think you and I think people of a certain mindset would push back, because what it is about is choice,
Absolutely.
right? And if you have zero choice, then that's not good at all.
Absolutely.
Right. So you provide them with that sense of empowerment. You make sure that they are getting the education that they want. You're putting people in front of them that are like them in the future. You're basically putting their future selves in front of them.
Absolutely. Yeah, basically. I love that analogy actually. Yeah.
You can use that and call
Yeah.
me a consultant.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you see yourself, if a person comes from the future and says, "Look at me, look what I did," that gives someone a direction, and they start to realize, like, oh, well, there is a path
hmm
from whatever my situation is
hmm
to this new place.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Is this unique to Ghana or to the African continent, though? Because, like you said, you are a person of two countries. We always want to help people in developing countries, but you're also in Canada, and no doubt that there are uneducated adolescents in poverty where you are as well.
So, I mean, I think one of the key things that it's important to note is that for a lot of like African countries, the education level, like there are girls that are in school that are educated, and then there are also girls that are not in school that do not have access to education. So there is it doesn't it's not kind of like a one way thing. There's different narratives everywhere and even in Canada. But one of the things that we recognized as we were building Power to Girls is that there's one thing that is common among all girls, or even like despite what country you're in or what environment you're in, which is like their mental well-being. And the key thing that we recognized was that self-esteem is one of the biggest issues that young girls face today. Whether you're in Ghana, whether you're in Zimbabwe, whether you're in Canada, low self-esteem is a really huge issue. So then we start asking ourselves and we start like looking deeper into it and look at all like the different factors that actually affect the young girl's self-esteem. So if you come to Canada, for instance, and you're working with like a marginalized group, you would have maybe their body image, you'd have their hair, you'd have, societal pressures, you have social media, and all of these different things playing a major role. And then you go to other parts of Africa where it may be the fact that, they do not have access to education. There's gender roles that they have to uphold, and there's all these different things. So again, like the narratives vary, but then the core issue always remains the same, is that low self-esteem is actually a big issue for young girls everywhere. So when we are doing our work and we're looking at how we can engage and empower these girls, we look at it from like where they are. We look at it from, their environments, we look at it from their society, and then we look at all the different factors that actually are affecting them and actually allowing them to make some of these decisions. And then we provide that empowerment to counteract that. So our work in Ghana will be different from our work in Canada in terms of like how we deliver it, because in Ghana, one of our main focuses is around education. But then when we come to Canada, one of our main focuses is around mental well-being. It's around leadership. It's around empowerment, because we have access directly into the schools. So it really, like, the work is the same, but then the approach is different depending on where we're at.
That makes sense. It is important to note that not all these programs are going to work exactly the same way in every country, every culture.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You mentioned also the importance of them seeing people, of anyone seeing someone that looks like them in the future. Do you call that mentorship? It's kind of like the Big Brother, Big Sister program, where you assign a human being to another human being and you say, this is your buddy or your brother or your sister.
Yeah, so we do call that mentorship. But I think for us, we do not necessarily limit it to the one-on-one. It's really around the people that we allow them to interact with. So who are they talking to on a day-to-day basis? So our facilitators are trained. Our facilitators have access to, some of these resources as well. And then they talk to them and then they see them. So it's really, who are we showing to them? Not only like in our meetings where we meet up with them one-on-one, but then it's also on social media. Who are the people that we are, amplifying? Who are the people that we are, we're providing, we're shining the light on? So I think that's kind of like how we go about it. And then I think it's also important to note that they themselves are also in a way mentors to each other. So that peer-to-peer mentorship is also very vital, because we've had girls, come together to a meeting, and then one person is feeling down, and then they all, chip in and encourage that person or talk to that person about what the challenges are, and then they problem solve someone else's issue right then and there. So I think it's also important to recognize the peer-to-peer relationship that they're building with each other. And some of these relationships are relationships that are going to last for a very long time, because again, they're also building their networks as well.
That is such an important thing. Just that sense of you can do it and getting external validation. Not everyone has unlimited internal validation. Like, just like they say that willpower is a well, and some people have a deeper well than others, and you have to refill that well. Self-esteem is a well as well. It needs to be built up, and getting just a friend or a mentor or a person that you respect to say, "Hey, look at you did that." Like, good on you for pulling that off. That fills your internal well, so that when you're alone and you need that validation, you can pull from within.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Interesting. You've done a number of interviews, and I've read most of them about like, what are some of the lessons that you've experienced in working with young girls? What is the thing that they need to learn?
That's a good question. So actually, they have also taught me a lot. I think I should really mention that working with these girls have taught me myself a lot. They have helped me grow, and they've also kept me accountable. One of the biggest lessons that I think we always like to shed light on for our girls is that they should be true to who they are. In this day and age of social media, a lot of times they try to be someone else, and it's easier for me to say it, of course, than for them to put it in practice. And even as adults, sometimes putting that in practice. But I think it's really important for them to really be staying true to who they are as individuals, and being able to cultivate that power and being able to cultivate that self-love and willpower, like you mentioned, within themselves, so that they're able to stand firm when challenges come their way. So those are some of the lessons that I have learned. My girls have taught me they've actually taught me the power of your story. And I say the power of your story because when we first started Power to Girls, it was based off of like my experiences as a young immigrant girl that came to Canada, that did not know where to go to for resources, was not necessarily open to the community. So it was really a lot of like trial and error. And as I was sharing these stories with these girls, I remember one of them coming up to me and saying, Aisha, you need to share your story more because more people need to hear this. So every time I'm invited to go somewhere and speak, they would come with me. And after they'll say, okay, that wasn't the full story. Next time you have to share the full story. So I think it's really and truly, they taught me the power of your story and the power of, the power in your story in actually creating change and changing lives. So yeah, like they've taught me a lot. And I think it's always reciprocal in terms of like the relationships that I have with them, because they keep me accountable. They keep me grounded as well.
And also teaching them accountability and the difference. I struggle with this with my young sons. They're 12 and 14. Is trying to have them understand the difference between being responsible for something and being accountable. Sometimes I'll say, you may not be responsible for a thing that happened to you. It could be a bad thing, but you are accountable for how you choose to react to that thing.
Absolutely.
When you need to focus on building, do you want to get bogged down by your database? MongoDB is an intuitive, flexible document database that lets you get to building. MongoDB's document model is a natural way to represent data, so you can focus on what matters. MongoDB Atlas is the best way to use MongoDB. It's a global cloud database service that gives you all of the developer productivity of MongoDB, plus the added simplicity of a fully managed database service. You can get started free with MongoDB Atlas at mongodb.com/atlas. Let me shift the conversation a little bit, because you are also a founder of a startup, and you're a non-technical founder. Your company is called DriveHER.
Yes.
Can you tell me about that?
Yes, absolutely. So DriveHER actually is it's a tech platform that connects female passengers to female drivers. And the funny thing is, DriveHER actually stemmed from Power to Girls and the work that we were doing with Power to Girls, because again, like my girls always come first. So one of the things that I noticed was that I was becoming, their designated driver. Their parents trusted me when they were going places for me to be that designated driver for them. And that was something that I was absolutely comfortable with, because, again, I had built that relationship with them. But then I also recognized that on days that I wasn't able to do that, there was not a lot of options out there for them. And then as the rideshare industry in itself, became very popular, we also noticed that the safety of women was not necessarily at the forefront of these innovations or of these technologies. So based off of, again, my personal experience and speaking to other women and their personal experiences, we decided to create DriveHER, which is, connecting female passengers to female drivers, but then also providing economic empowerment for women as a whole. So we looked at a sector that has become very saturated, a sector that had become very focused, and it is still very male dominated, and thought, how can we flip this on its head and provide that safe space for women. But then also recognizing that it wasn't just women that wanted to use the platform. It was parents that also wanted to use the platforms, parents that wanted to use the platforms for their parents or their kids, right? So really and truly, like, it was really about creating a safer space for women and kids.
Mm-hmm. It is worth pointing out for folks that might go off and Google for DriveHER that there is a driveher.com out of London that is not the same. We're looking at driveher.ca. This is the Canadian, currently in Toronto. I'm curious, if you were to put together an all-female taxi service, you said that the technology is not taking into consideration women and people who might not feel safe in a traditional taxi service, but it feels like you're solving a problem as a woman for women, but it's the men that are the problem. Shouldn't we start a little earlier and tell the men not to make you feel unsafe in a car?
I love the fact that, and like I said, like, I've heard a lot of narratives for DriveHER, but that's the first one. Like, this is the first time I've heard that. And I love the fact that you pointed that out. Honestly, like, that should be how it is, right? Unfortunately, a lot of people don't see it like that. So we thought it's important for us as women, and even like for women, to take their safety into their own hands, right? So that's part of the reason why we created DriveHER, because again, like, every single time that, we hear a story of we hear like a story of, someone being harassed or assaulted in traditional taxis or in like rideshare platforms, it always happens to be women. And then, you'd also, in most cases, also kids also encounter this as well. So for us, it was really about, how can we create a safer space? How can we ensure that, we are not only empowering women, but then also providing them with access into a sector that has been male dominated for a very long time.
And it is worth pointing out that, of course, you are focused on anyone who identifies as a woman, and they can feel free to be involved in that.
Absolutely.
Service. Now, there has been some negativity with some male taxi drivers who feel that that's discriminatory, but I'm hearing you say that this isn't about, like, if someone wanted to start a male-only taxi service, I suppose they could, but the whole point was safety. And if a woman does not feel safe, then this is why that solution exists.
Absolutely.
Right. Like, I have never felt unsafe really anywhere traveling. Like, I travel a lot. In fact, one time was I in Prague? Somewhere in Prague, and I was having trouble sleeping, and I got up at like 2 a.m. and I walked around like Old Town Prague at like 2 a.m. And Prague's a perfectly safe place, I guess. But again, everywhere is a perfectly safe place until it's completely unsafe, right? Until something happens. And I came back and I called my wife and I said, yeah, I was just walking around. And she's like, you were walking around a strange European country at 2 a.m? She's like, that is the most 6-foot white guy thing I've ever heard in my life. Like, she's like, no one, who does that? And I'm like, basically all men, right? We happily walk around everywhere without any fear about turning a corner and catch, because I'm the bad guy, right? I'm the one with the trench coat and the hat. I actually took a picture and someone said it looked like I was a spy waiting for a meetup, somewhere in Eastern Europe. Safety first. I think it's great.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. So as a non-technical founder, how do you do that? Do you have a technical counterpart, like a Bill Gates to your Steve Ballmer? Or how do you coordinate that? Because you know your vision, but it sounds like you're not the primary coder on this.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's actually a really good question. So I do not, currently we're actually looking for a technical co-founder as we speak. But then what it was really around, how can I transfer the vision that I have to the developers that we're currently working with for them to produce a solution that works. And I think that is actually the beauty of this, is because I'm able to view my product first as a customer before a founder. And I think that gave me greater insights because I was able to look at it as like, oh no, I don't think our customers will like this. Or as a customer, this is, maybe we need to move this around. Maybe we need to change this user interface. Maybe we need to make sure that this speaks to this in this way. So it actually gave me a deeper appreciation for the work that we were doing because I was coming at it first, not just as a user, not as a founder, but then more as a user. And I think that's really important, especially for folks that are out there that are building technology products and not necessarily have that technical background to be able to appreciate that aspect that most times the technical founder would not necessarily be able to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. You need that two sides of the same coin. You need to look at it from different perspectives. You need that. I know that sometimes it's a bit of a cliche to say diversity of thought, but if everyone is a technical co-founder from the same place and the same generation and the same school, you're going to miss something. There'll be a blind spot there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So through both of these things, your NGO and your startup, I'm seeing a pattern of using technology for social good. And whether someone agrees or disagrees with whether or not there's a need for an all-female taxi service isn't the point. It is you're calling it a social profit business.
Yes. Yes.
So you're making it okay to make money while also improving the lives of people in some fundamental way.
Absolutely.
Changing society.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is.
And how did you start that, this idea of the social profit sector? Is that a thing that you named or is that a well-known space?
So I think most of the time people hear social, kind of like a social enterprise. I think I kind of coined the social profit aspect mainly because, again, a lot of times when I hear folks talking about technology or talking about innovation, they always assume that technology is equal to innovation. But in most cases, that's not the case, right? Technology is always a conduit. Technology is always kind of like, the foundation that you use to actually create some of these innovations. And then there are some innovative things that you do that are not also technology dependent, right? So I think it's really important to be able to separate those two. For me, it was really important that every aspect of the work that I do impacts lives. So it's like, yeah, how can we still ensure that we're making money, but then we're still changing and affecting lives? So that was how those two things came together. It's like the social profit, where you are making profit, but then you're also creating societal changes.
Mm-hmm. And then having a sustainability plan, having a strategy to go and scale that organization, that's part of your consulting business.
Yes. So that is one of the things that I focus on is around how can we build sustainable programs. And this is mainly for my sort of like the NGO aspect is that how can you build sustainable programs and how can you ensure that you're able to build programs or build an organization that is not solely dependent on grants, but then you're able to really change and affect lives and still be able to make enough money to sustain the work that you're doing and then also to scale that work that you're doing.
A lot of people are trying to build the next big company and they go and try to make $1 billion company. But I have long believed that I would rather have $4 or $5 million companies than one giant company. I like the idea of spreading it around. And I also like the idea of what I call a boutique startup, one that makes some income, potentially some passive income, but you don't necessarily need to make the next $100 million business. I'm curious if you think DriveHER becomes something that gets bought by Uber and Lyft and then you're a billionaire, or do you keep it at a comfortable, manageable size and make it a boutique industry?
To be quite honest with you, for us, the focus is always on community. The focus is around how we creating that social change. So if our scaling strategy is that we get bought out and then we're able to create mini micro companies around the world, that's great. But then if our customers and our audience is saying, okay, we need this here, we need this here, we need this here, we need this here, and we have the resources to be able to do that too, then that's kind of like what the focus is on. But for now, like, again, like my focus is around how can we scale, how can we really create that impact and see this, in other parts of the world. So like we've had folks reach out from the States, we've had folks reach out from like the Europe asking, even folks in Africa wanting to bring DriveHER to, their respective communities because they see the value in it and because there's an actual need there. So for us, it's really about how can we still create that change and still be able to impact the lives that we want to. Again, like I mentioned earlier, we are also looking for a technical co-founder. So if there's anyone out there that is as bad, can I say badass?
I'm not sure. I think you're the first, but that's fine.
Yeah, like, if you're looking for a really amazing, we would love for it to be a woman that, has that technical know-how, that has that technical acumen, and is willing to join, a social profit business, then please let us know and we'll be definitely open to seeing how that goes.
So we have a diverse audience who is listening, and if they've made it this far into the show, they've made it 30 minutes into a show, and they're on the way to work, and maybe they're sitting in the parking lot or the driveway of their job, getting ready to go inside, and they're thinking, "I've just listened to 30 minutes about technology for social good, and I know that there is a DriveHER, and there is this empowerment. What do I do though as I walk into my job at this company? What do I do with this information that you've given us?"
That's a good question. So I think one of the things that I would say is that think about how the work that you're doing and, the technologies that you're building is affecting the lives of people. I think you should also recognize that you have the power in your hands to really and truly create that social change that we're talking about, and recognizing that whatever it is that you're building, in some cases, for some people, might not necessarily be for the everyday person, but then how does it affect the everyday person on a holistic level, not necessarily on kind of like a us versus them thing, but then more around like a holistic aspect of it. So yeah, those are some of the things that I would say. And then one last thing that I would add is that recognizing that, again, when you're building for others, you're building for people. So always put those people at the forefront of whatever it is that you're building. And then also engaging them in that process, because you cannot necessarily build for other people without having them engage in that process.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
We've been talking with Aisha Addo. You can check out the links in the show notes to all of her projects, and as well as following her on Twitter. This has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.